Oh, here we go. Man, thank you so much for coming out, Christian. This is Christian Dadulak and my guest today. Appreciate you coming out.
I am pumped to be here. Thanks for having me out, man.
Thank you. Yeah, so this is Raising the Grade. I'm still learning what exactly it is. So far, I just really have been having fun highlighting people, not just in my industry, but in the business world. And I am ecstatic to kind of get your take on a lot of things, because I think a lot of the people that have come through here could potentially, be wanting to franchise at some point. And that's what you do.
That's right.
Who do you work for? Who is the outfit that you're with, if you're free to say?
Yeah, 100%. So I am a franchise advisor with Franchise Sidekick, franchise advisor, franchise broker, franchise consultant. It all means the same thing. So essentially, I'm like Match.com for franchises, or put another way.
That's a great analogy.
Put another
I think everybody just got that instantly.
Right. Well, that's how it hopefully will stick. Right. But put another way, it's almost like being a real estate broker for franchises. And so I build my own book of business, my own client list through Franchise Sidekick. Franchise Sidekick, a way to think about them or us is we are a team of advisors. So we're like the Remax or the Keller Williams of the franchise advisory space. Most people that do what I do in the industry are solo franchise brokers, franchise advisors that are kind of on their own. And I originally started that way, but saw what we were building with Franchise Sidekick. It's very disruptive. It doesn't really exist.
Cool.
So joined the team, and long story short, it's a franchise advisory firm.
How fun. I am going to have so much fun picking your brain. I think on behalf of just all the people in the service space that everybody thinks, we're going to franchise this thing one day. And so I'm excited to get into all of that. But I kind of drill everybody out of the gate and put the screws to you a little bit and ask, who is Christian?
Who is Christian? So for me, I guess in a nutshell, I won't bore you with too many details, but a 2 to 3 minute background, and we'll see if it ends up being 2 to 3 minutes. But
we're going to check it.
So California is where I'm from originally. Okay. First name's Christian, last name's Dadulak, like Cadillac. If you get to know me, you'll hear me say that a million times. And that's because I think it helps people to remember my name.
I've never forgotten that since I met you.
And that's why I say it. So it's Dadulak, just not spelled the same way as Cadillac, but Cadillac with a D, basically. And so from California, the suburbs of Los Angeles, born and raised there. I went to school like everybody else. I put my pants on one leg at a time like everybody else. I don't really, I went to school growing up, pretty normal lifestyle in the suburbs, went to Arizona State for college. And, that's why I ultimately ended up coming back here, but went to ASU for college, did the whole fraternity thing, had done multiple different like network marketing companies. Very quickly in college, I realized I'm investing, or what I thought was investing, all this money into my education. And I'm not someone that poo-poos college. I think it's great for a lot of people. Don't think it's for everybody, but I also think that it's oversold in many ways. And I went to college and I started doing different network marketing companies because I realized that I'm going to get out of college. And at the time, what would I be making? 40, 50, maybe $60,000 a year if I'm doing well. And that really did not excite me at all. And when I first got into college, I was thinking about going into the Marine Corps, and I was in the Marine Corps ROTC program at ASU for a couple of years. And I realized that, they don't necessarily make a ton of money either doing what I wanted to do within the Marines, which would have been infantry. I never ended up going in, but obviously tremendous amount of respect. A lot of friends that are in the military. But my mind got focused a little bit more on like, how can I make money, and not just for the sake of having money, but because of what it can bring me and for my family, especially after my dad passed away in 2014 from pancreatic cancer. And it's like, okay, dad's out of the picture. We got mom, we got my little brother who's only 15 months younger than me. Now it kind of shifted priorities a little bit, where it's like, how do we start making some money? And I realized corporate world isn't going to do that, or at least not quickly enough. And so I started figuring out like, what are different methods to do this? Had done different network marketing type things. And through that, what I tell a lot of young people, I'm still pretty young, but what I tell young people is, say yes to everything. Like in the beginning, you don't have a lot of opportunities. And so
I like that. That's a little gem right there.
Yeah. Say yes to everything, meet everyone, say yes to everything. build your skills, because you don't know what you don't know yet. You don't know what opportunities you're going to like, what opportunities you're going to excel at, what opportunities you're going to flop at. I flopped at a heck of a lot of things before I found ultimately what I really like doing. But I built skills along the way, and I made different relationships. And through those relationships, each one of those ended up being a stepping stone to the next thing in my life. So one network marketing company led to me getting into financial services. And then through people that I met there, ended up me getting involved into selling kind of a licensing opportunity, which is almost like franchising's cousin, and had started to help people buy that business.
You're great at analogies, by the way.
Thank you. Well, I've had a lot of time to think about them.
Fair.
And I've borrowed from people as well.
Fair.
And we ended up starting that business, myself, my family, my mom, my brother. And so we ran that for a few years. Pandemic hit. That was fun. We still did well, did okay. But I wanted to take what I was already doing, which I got really good at, which was helping people to buy businesses. But that industry, especially with COVID and whatnot, there's a lot of uncertainty. The lead flow, the interest level in that kind of business kind of dried up for a little bit.
I can see that.
And so, because it was a non-invasive fat loss and skin tightening clinic. And so I wanted to continue to do that. But the question was, how can I have more than one opportunity to offer my clients? And I know there's opportunities out there right now that are killing it. I know a lot of essential home services, property service type businesses were doing exceptionally well. So how can I offer those kinds of things? And so long story short, did some digging, thought about becoming a business broker for a second, but that's working more on the selling side, more so than the buy side. And then, but through looking at different business brokerages, I found in the moniker of one of them that they did franchise consulting. And I was like, what the heck is franchise consulting? I had never heard of that. And if you're like most people, you probably haven't heard about what franchise consulting is. And so I started digging, found it, paid money to join a program, saw you could make a lot of money, saw I could have hundreds of opportunities to offer my clients versus just one. So rather than trying to, fit a square peg in a round hole, I could have many opportunities and make sure it's the right fit for the client. So that's kind of how I got into this, long story short. And that's my background.
Wow. That was a lot.
Yeah.
That was fast. and
more than 2 to 3 minutes.
No, I think you did fine. I think I'm really curious then too about, meeting up with, so do your clients they just come to you directly mostly, or are leads kind of fed to you, a little bit of both? How do you get in touch with people to help? And then what does it kind of look like to take somebody from this window cleaning company in the real world and go, here, you two need to connect?
Yeah, great question. So it's a little bit of both as far as where we find the people from. Originally, when I was on my own independent solo franchise consultant, it was all myself, all my own personal lead generation efforts. So social media, I had a top rated podcast in the franchise industry. It would be buying leads, and leads could be very expensive. My average cost per deal could be, at the time, $5,000, $7,500, could be close to $10K or more now. And so it could be very expensive, but a lot of marketing, buying leads, personal relationships, going on podcasts. I mean, really anything and everything, right? But the key main channels were buying leads. Nowadays, one of the nice things about being part of a platform like Franchise Sidekick is they do a lot of the front end marketing. So I am, Sidekick will do all the lead generation and marketing so that I can do what I do best.
I love that.
Which is
compartmentalizing things.
Exactly. It's like an assembly line, just the way that Ford had made things. Everyone owns their own little piece of the puzzle, their own piece of the assembly line. So I don't have to focus on trying to be the best at everything, because if you're trying to be the best at everything, you end up being the best at nothing. And I get to focus on doing the one thing which I'm good at, which I enjoy, which is advising clients and helping them to find the right franchise opportunities. So Sidekick generates the leads. Leads will fill out different forms online. They will respond to different marketing campaigns that we'll do. Our specialists, which is essentially like an appointment setter, they will reach out to those leads via phone call, email, text, qualify them to some extent. And then if they're the right fit, kind of who we're looking for, they have whatever capital required for that specific franchise opportunity or just in general, they'll set them up with one of us on the advisor team. So whether it's me or one of the other 14 advisors that we have on our team right now.
Okay, that's a lot. Nationwide advisors?
Yeah, so we're plopped all over the United States. We work with people nationally, so I'm not limited to a certain region. I don't only work with people here in Scottsdale, Phoenix metro area.
Okay.
I help people buy franchises all over the United States, and that's true of all of us on the advisor team.
Okay.
And we all live all over the United States as well.
How does that work? Because I feel like there's a intrinsic like, hey, this one's going to do good because it's, this service in this market. But like if somebody wants to buy something in Mississippi, do you have to do a bunch of research to be like, okay, this is a good fit or not? Or are you just looking at the business maybe more than the location? Like, how do you kind of help steer people? Like, what are some examples maybe of steering somebody to, or like a good example of, man, this was a great fit?
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen?
Yeah. Well, on the territory side of things, I mean, the answer is yes, that is something that we consider. That's something that there's some initial stuff that we'll do just to make sure that, yes, it's a viable territory. Then the degree of viability, that's going to come as we get deeper in the process. There are tools that we'll give our clients. There are things even more so that the franchisor will give clients and analytics that they look at.
Yeah. Fair.
And a lot of that too is on the franchisee too, the franchise buyer, right? You got to do your right. Yeah. Exactly. Like we can't do it for you. And there's certain legal things as far as what I can and can't do for them too.
Okay.
But in order to be successful in the things that I keep in mind as far as what's going to be the right fit for somebody is you have to have the right person plus the right franchise plus the right territory. You could have a C- operator, so someone that, or you can have an A+ opportunity, put it this way, a really great brand, a really great leadership team, franchise structure opportunity. But if you give that to a C student or a C- student or a D student who just maybe isn't a good operator or shouldn't buy a business, then they're going to take what would otherwise have been a great opportunity for somebody else and flop on it and not turn it into something.
Yeah. How hard is that?
It is hard. And that's why you have to have the right person. But the territory matters as well. So whenever there's someone that's interested in franchising, so we get them to fill out a basic questionnaire as far as what their criteria is, because different people have different goals and different objectives. There's no one size fits all approach, and certain skills and how much time can they put in? How much money can they put in? What are their financial goals? How quickly do they need to pull money out of the business?
All great questions.
Right? Are they going to be operating this? Is their spouse? Is some other equity partner? There's so many things to keep in mind. And so what kind of support is important to them? Do they really want help on the customer acquisition side? Or are they kind of already a salesperson? They're willing to go out there and beat the streets, but they need help more on the operations side, finance side, those kinds of things. So there's a whole lot of things that play into it. And we'll get a sense of that. Once I have those options, internally here at Sidekick, which is another thing that separates us from a lot of consultants that are out there in the industry, is it's not just the world according to Christian.
Sure.
Everything we do is data driven. So we have internal algorithms that will, based on the questions that they ask to those or answer to those, that questionnaire, it will match them to different opportunities within our portfolio and it will score them. It'll give them a ranking. So, 99%, 80%, and it's not an exact science. And so I can still override it based on what I know, but that at least is a helpful guide.
Yeah.
And then that will help me to narrow down from the over 220 brands in our portfolio right now. And we're always adding new brands, but it'll help me to filter down to maybe a top 15, 20. And then I'm going to reach out to those franchises to make sure that their market is actually available because it might already be sold out to somebody else.
By somebody else. Like, is this a thing where like this market's available in this territory and not just you guys, like you don't have an exclusive, but like there's other agencies trying to all do the same thing, essentially?
Right. So there's other consultants. Yeah, there's other consultants
or
that
like you were before this. Like there could be a one-off guy that's like, no, I got this.
Right. Now, the nice thing about being a part of a bigger group like Sidekick is sometimes we can get, I wouldn't say special treatment, but because
more pull.
Because we do a little bit more volume than the average consultant does.
This is real life.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
so we can fight for our clients a little bit more than maybe the average broker can. But you're right. You are competing against those people.
Fascinating.
So it does happen.
Fascinating. Have you personally have you kicked yourself yet? Like, oh, I should have got in.
Yeah.
I knew it was a good opportunity. Like anything, you don't have to share specifics, but like I could see like I would beat myself up constantly if I was doing your job. How do you separate that from like, okay, I'm just doing my job. I'm professional at what I do versus like, okay, I want in.
Yep.
Or have you gone in?
Yeah.
Maybe there's more that I don't know too.
Right.
There's 7 questions. Answer them in order, please.
Yes. So the reality is, honestly, no, because I know what my goals are. And I know that if you try to chase 2 rabbits, you end up catching neither. And so my goals right now is to build up my own advisory practice, build up my own advisory team. Once that's set up, my team is good to go. And I have kind of that infrastructure in place, then maybe we start going out there and doing some other things in the franchise world.
Okay.
Right. But on what side of the fence that's going to be on the franchisee or maybe the franchisor side, I don't know yet.
Okay.
I'm leaning towards one versus the other, and we can talk about that. But I mean, there's been plenty of opportunities that I'm like, yeah, if circumstances were different, if this was already built, this is something that I would probably invest in. But the other reality was I wasn't living in California before. So after I went to Arizona State, went back to college for however many years, several years. And California in franchising, not to bore people with all the legal details, but it's what's known as a registration state.
Okay.
There's 13 registration states in franchising. New York, California, Maryland, Illinois, Indiana, already, Virginia, right?
Okay.
And so what that means is, so there's a document in franchising called a franchise disclosure document. We refer to it as an FDD for short. Every year, each franchise needs to update their FDD with updated numbers. If they change the terms of their agreement, anything that people need to know about the opportunity, that needs to be refiled annually, regardless of
circulated and
right. And so in those 13 registration states, they have to be not just registered in the state and refiled in the state, but they have to be approved by the state. And in some states that can take a long time. So there's extra regulation. There's a lot of money that comes into that. There's attorneys, there's headache. And so a lot of franchises will choose just not to go to California or New York. Or if they do, they're like, okay, we're going to sell out in the easier markets first, and then we'll expand into some of these tougher markets. Like we had one.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. Like I won't even name the brand, but one of our advisors, my good friend Des, she has a client right now who wanted to buy the rights to 3 territories or 3 locations to open 3 locations for a certain beauty franchise. And I won't name the brand. And I think it is the right call on the brand's part.
Okay.
But the founder said, no, we're only comfortable starting with 1 because California is a little bit of a different ball game in certain respects. And so we want to start with 1, make sure that the franchise owner doesn't bite off more than they can chew. It's the right fit for them. And we're like, totally agree with that. Like our whole mission is to help our clients reduce risk when buying a franchise.
Everybody looks good when everybody's succeeding.
Exactly. But the reason for that is because it's in California. And so California and those types of states can make things difficult. So a lot of opportunities I didn't even have available to me in California because it's a registration state and they just weren't registered. And it doesn't matter. Even if I want to open up in Arizona or I want to open up in some other state, it has to be registered in the state you live in. Now, there are there are some workarounds if you're a super high net worth person and things like that. So there's some workarounds, but for the average investor and where I've been, a lot of the key opportunities that I would have jumped on are not there. And I've liked a lot of home services brands. And in California, there's extra requirements as far as having a GC license or general contractor's license. So there's just different workarounds. And so a lot of those opportunities, my goal was, hey, let's just build this up for now. That's part of why I moved to Arizona because it's a lot less restricted on the franchise law side of things. And there's other, business friendliness to it as well. The challenge now is I live in a very hot market. And so a lot of the new hot franchise opportunities sell out very quickly here. So you got to be ready to move pretty quickly.
Already have your mind kind of made up and know exactly what you're looking for and stuff. So this is so fun to have you here and pick your brain in front of people. So what, some of my previous guests, I would say, have the potential to consider franchising. So, what if, let's use myself as a case study. What if we want to take Rising Tides to Tucson or Scottsdale or other markets in Arizona or outside of the state? What are the things that business owner might do or be doing consistently to be preparing for that? Because I'm sure it's not like you're like, hey, we should go here. Let's do it. You know, like if it's your own business, I can open up another location. It's a whole nother animal when I'm going to say, you go open up my other location and you own it. Like what are some things you can do to prep as a business to go to that next step?
Well, I think prepping is one conversation. I think the other conversation is, should I even franchise in the first place?
Amen.
What are the pros and cons of it? There's different ways to scale, and franchising isn't the right fit for every business from a growth strategy standpoint.
Sure.
There's certain things to consider. I think there are pros and cons like there are for everything. It needs to tie into the founder's goals.
Okay.
Like, what are your goals at the end of the day? I could make the case for why franchising, those kinds of things, but it does tie into what the owners and the founders' goals are. But as far as prepping, it just you obviously step one, have a successful business, which is easier said than done.
Yeah.
Right. And I think a lot of people, they want to franchise too early. Like they have one location or they're operating in one small market and, they have some decent financials, but they haven't really proven
systematized it.
Yeah. Right. Do you really have systems in place? For example, like it's nice to see if there's
Carol, the bookkeeper, doesn't count as a system. Yeah.
Right. And are there multiple locations? If it's one location, hard to say that that's really a proof of concept. If there's,
Fair.
2 or 3 locations in the valley, okay, you built up a little bit of a brand, so those are key things. Are your financials there, right? There's got to be enough top line revenue so that, and the margins have to be there, of course, as well, because like, let's say that you net, 30%, right, as an owner, right, currently. Well, if someone buys into your franchise, you're going to charge them a royalty. That's usually anywhere from about 5 to 9% off of gross.
Wow.
Right. But you're going to be providing a lot. And that's why people become a franchise.
Yeah.
But you're going to take 5 to 9%. Then there's usually going to be a brand fund, which is a national marketing fund that the franchises are going to contribute to. That's not a profit center for the franchisor, which is the parent company.
Yep.
But that is an ongoing cost to the franchisees that they need to be aware of. And that's like a pot that they all put money into to grow the national recognition of the franchise. That's where commercials and radio ads come from.
Okay.
Those kinds of things. That's normally 1 to 2% of gross revenue.
And we're talking like big names. Like I'm sure I can say it, like McDonald's. You want to franchise the big boy, you're going to put into this pot. But like, so I'm sure everybody starts, McDonald's was one shop and then it was a few shops. Like, is there kind of like local franchising and then like interstate franchising? Like, is that a thing?
100%. It depends on a lot of the brands we work with. They are backed by not always, but they're usually backed by seasoned franchising teams. Okay. That this is not their first rodeo. They've partnered with emerging brands and they've taken them from zero to hero. When I say zero, I mean 0 franchise locations to hero over a relatively short period of time. And, I would argue that, some do it more responsibly than others, but they can do that. And typically they're usually wanting to take them nationwide, but they have the experience in doing that. And they have the backing, the infrastructure, the teams in place. So, but for some franchises, especially when it comes to things like food, where supply chain issues are a real thing, maybe you start off with, within, interstate at first. Like, let's just stay in Arizona. Let's build out in the Phoenix metro area. Let's build out a bunch of locations out here. And then let's expand into the rest of that region and then expand region by region and then maybe nationwide at that point. Okay. Some brands will do it nationally. It really depends on the industry in many cases.
Yeah. What are you doing? What are you offering? Like you're not going to sell a whole lot of turf in Minnesota. Yeah. Right. Like, or it's just going to be real grass there. Right. Or, you might not even do really a lot of pavers in somewhere like Oregon, where it's, heavy concrete market. So I get you there on that angle. But I mean, I think that ties back to what I was talking about with the region or the location. Like it just matters so much. Like you must just have a team just researching stuff all the time.
So
how does that work?
That's more so the franchisor. So when I do those territory checks that I was mentioning before, so when I have that 15 to 20 options narrowed down, I will submit through our system. We have a ton of technology that we've invested in at Sidekick. So I just click some buttons. Our tech team is amazing. They're freaking phenomenal. I would have no idea how to do what they built.
Love it.
And I click some buttons that sends territory checks over to the franchise team at these different franchises. Wow. And they have all of these tools and analytics. So they know how to go in. Like they know, and I know as well, like they share with us what their minimum territory requirements are. We're looking for, and we'll give them at least 200,000 in population minimum for a territory. We'll give you however many zip codes that they need to get up to that population. Here's other demographics we look for too. But they have very sophisticated tools that they'll use like Gibbous or Buxton Analytics, where they can really dive into a territory and see some pretty really good data. So what is the average age of a home in this market? What is the median household income? And those are some of those things you can look up, but there are other things that they can look at, average credit score and like there's really cool things that they can.
Insane.
Yes.
I have just briefly played around online a little bit. I was trying to do some EDDM marketing, which didn't work out well. Yeah. And, but I was able to see so much of the regions and I was like, this is bizarre. All this data is just sitting here. Just waiting to be mined. Do you guys use AI at all as part of your structure yet?
We do more and more. We try not to rely on it too much, but we use it as a tool.
Sure.
And we understand that it has limitations, but I think as it gets more and more developed and more sophisticated, it will absolutely become more and more of a part of our process. But a lot of franchisors are leveraging it already.
Dude, it's insane.
Yeah. I mean, there's one that is in our market here. Again, I don't want to name drop all these brands and give them free press, but I mean, maybe I could. But there's one that's in the beauty industry. It's in the hair removal, waxing kind of space. They're based out of Arizona. Founder is phenomenal. And he is leveraging AI where their AI scheduling tool on their website, it is very developed and sophisticated. You could have a full-on conversation with it. It will answer questions around, hey, if it's that time of the month and I'm a woman, is it okay if I come in? Is it, it will answer questions based on that. It will say, hey, if I need to cancel my appointment or reschedule, or I'm running late, and it'll say, oh, if you're going to be a few minutes late, it might just we can stick with it. If it's going to be more than that, let's reschedule. Dang. So it has all this very intuitive information that it could use to book appointments. A lot of their marketing is all managed by corporate as well, but on the AI side, they will schedule appointments, reschedule them. When they get in, they don't need a receptionist. There's a little kiosk. If you're a walk-in, you have one kiosk. If you're checking in for your appointment, you have another. You just put in your information, you check in, your esthetician comes out, grabs you, they go perform the service, then you're done. That eliminated a whole employee. Yep. So you don't need to be paying someone, it could be.
An AI shows up to work every single day.
Exactly. It's not going to call out sick. It's not going to call out because it's hungover. It's going to do the work at the end of the day. So that's one way that they're leveraging it.
That's so cool.
And that's, it could be depending on the state and depending on benefits and everything else you're paying your front desk person, it could be $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 a month, to have that. So that's putting that back in the franchise owner's pocket. So AI more and more is becoming a huge part of franchising, and that's only scratching the surface in terms of how it's being used.
I think everything. It's been fun to play around with ChatGPT.
Oh yeah, and we use that too.
Used it for a couple different things, and then I've been approached by some folks too that want to, do kind of a similar thing, like. I'm just not convinced that with all the questions I've got to ask and how impersonal it is, I just don't know for me if it's something that I can use on that level for scheduling for what I want, but
it depends on the industry. I think in more sales heavy businesses where you're going out there, it's tougher. But what some franchisors have implemented in that space is more AI based sales training. Like even non-franchise businesses like A1 Garage out here, like Tommy Mello, if you're familiar.
Yeah, they're big.
They'll leverage AI sales training. So they'll record some of the in-home sales interactions.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
On their iPad and the AI. And my buddy Dan Claps, who I had the podcast with in the franchise space for many years, and he is the franchisor in the restoration space, cleaning and restoration space. Okay. And they will use the same type of thing where when their salesperson is in home, they'll get permission, of course, to have the in-home consultation recorded on their iPad, and the meeting will be recorded, and it will explain to the VOTA team and the franchisee, the owner of the franchise, here's how often the franchise or the salesperson was talking. Here's how often the franchise owner was talking, or the homeowner was talking, what percentage of the time. Here are inflection points and tonality that convey different types of emotions.
Wow.
And so you can coach based on that. So the AI, its analysis of what a human is already doing provides coaching opportunities for the franchise owner. So that's one way that in your space that people are leveraging AI and technology.
I love that.
Yeah.
No, I'm eating that up. I'm just thinking about that right now, about how powerful that would be to, basically if you had the right inputs there, it could hold you accountable afterwards as well. So I hear you being very kind and saying coaching opportunities, but also auditing you. Right. And just saying, dude, you were talking 70% of the time. It's the other way around.
Yeah. And you didn't ask for the order. You didn't ask for the order at the end.
There's all these check boxes that could be fed into that. That's powerful.
Yeah.
My mind's a little bit spinning right there. Cause I think I've, kind of thought about the self-scheduling to the moon and back and how that just wouldn't work. But that seems really powerful for me and what I do.
Yeah. 100%.
So, tell me a little bit more about, maybe yourself. What are some of your passions, some things that you love doing that gets you excited outside of work, because
Yeah.
it's clear you love what you do,
Yeah.
which is a blessing. I mean, that's huge
Yeah.
to be able to show up to work every day and be like, yeah, let's go. What are we doing today?
Yeah.
What else? What else about you? What,
You know,
go for it.
yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, franchising kind of is who I am in my life. And that's not the answer that a lot of people like to hear.
No, that's okay.
But like business is my passion. Business is my hobby.
Yeah.
And that's,
go with that. I feel
Yeah.
like if you're a stonemason and
Yeah.
you're chiseling stuff out, like it just kind of starts to become
right.
who you are.
Yeah. And so it's funny. Whenever I'm with my franchise friends or we're at some event, even if we're at like, a happy hour or something like that. And it's like, we don't need to talk shop right now.
Yeah. Loosen up.
But the reality is like, that's what we're interested in. Like, it's fun and exciting to talk about what's next. What are we building? Like, what's working for you? What's not? Like, what are you seeing on the horizon and what's coming out next? Like, what are the challenges your franchise owners are having? Or how are they doing well? What are success stories? Like this is stuff we like talking about. We talk about other stuff too, but like this is our sport. This is our hobby. I mean, I love it. Like the NFL athlete is talking about the game, I'm sure a lot of the time. You think Tom Brady, when he's off the clock, is thinking about a whole lot else other than improving his craft in football?
I think you nailed it.
And
I like it.
It's the same thing here. Like, are there things that I like to do? Yes. I love God. I love my family. I love trying new restaurants, right? I love those kinds of things. I like experiencing new activities. I like meeting new people. I like, wine tasting and things like that. I like snowboarding. I like traveling and visiting new locations. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I mean, I like to build.
Wow.
I'm most excited when I'm building things, when I'm meeting people that are also wanting to build. It's funny. Like, I talk so much about franchising and business ownership that actually a girl that I was seeing, maybe about a woman I was seeing a couple of months ago, she kind of broke it off because I talk about it too much.
No.
Yeah. Which is okay. Right. But like,
you'll find the one that's like, I just mentioned Hart Mosley in my last podcast, but I mean, I feel like I hear him and is it Layla? I hear him and Layla's story, and it's exactly that. Like, she was like, well, let's go get him then. Right. And so I think that is who you will find. Right. And and it is. And that's I say that to convey, like, that's how much I love this stuff. My brother makes fun of me all the time. Like, whenever we're going to go out to, eat somewhere, I'm the obnoxious guy and any of my friends will tell you this too. I'm the obnoxious guy that's pointing out all the different franchises as we pass them, and because that's fun. Like, for me, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that they were in this town, or that's so cool. Wow. In construction, I don't know if there's a name for it, but every trade is literally like, oh yeah, put a water heater in that house over there. Oh yeah, we did that roof about 6 years ago. Like, you're same thing. It matters. It's part of who you are. It's a point of personal pride. And I think as Americans, like, we used to have that so much more like 50, 80 years ago, because we built something with our hands. Like, there was a pride that came with it because you could see the fruits of your labor. Yeah. And you could tell your grandkids, I helped build the Empire State Building, or I had a part in building this or building that. And for me, like, I didn't build the business, but it's fun to know that, oh, I've had a part in that brand, or maybe that is a franchise location that's going to be opening up here. Yeah. So, I have, I just did a placement with a client of mine who's going to be opening up 3 locations for a beauty brand here in Scottsdale and Tempe, and I think a couple in Scottsdale, 1 in Tempe. Yeah. Cool. And I'm going to absolutely like highlight him and visit it. And it's going to be cool, like driving past it, referring people over and knowing that, like, he did the whole thing. Like, he built it, he funded it, he did all that, but I connected him to the opportunity. I helped him to do the due diligence, or walked him through that process, made sure he was prepared. And it's cool to have a hand in that. Don't kid yourself. Your hands are all over it. Yeah. And that's a fun thing to hear, because that's another thing I feel like is shared by the majority of my guests, is a desire to improve things. Yes. Things are at, L, and we want to go M&OP all the way to Z, you know? And so it's fun to see people just progressing and pushing the needle farther and farther. So I love that. I love that. What advice would you give to people that are considering franchising, probably I should say buying a franchise? What are some like baseline checkpoints, like to see if somebody's got the stomach for it, or if they should be pursuing it? Like, maybe what are your top 3 questions? Well, I think they're questions you have to ask yourself.
I mean, there's obviously like, do you have the funds? And those are things that I could help my clients to determine.
That's
if they
like, but like, what's maybe some of the hidden golden nuggets? They're like, look, here's the thing about franchising.
Yeah. Well, I think again, it's looking internally. Everyone wants to blame. Like if you talk to all of,
I know where you go.
If you talk to all of the franchisees that are not doing well in the system, they're going to blame the franchise. If you talk to all of the
it's all
successful,
out there,
right?
Not
correct.
Yeah.
If you talk to the franchise owners that are killing it, and they're not going to say, "Oh, it's necessarily me," but what they're always going to say is, "I followed the system. I did what they told me to do, and I executed on it." Franchising, you succeed in franchising because of execution, and that's any business though. Everyone and their mom has an idea that's worth millions of dollars potentially. Most of them don't do jack diddly squat with it. Because they just don't. They it's fun for them to say that they have an idea. Oh, well, I came up with that idea. I came up with a similar thing to Facebook
10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, did you do anything with it? No. Well, Zuck did.
Yep.
So your idea isn't worth jack. The execution is. So there's that. But then looking internally, are you the type of person that follows through on stuff historically in your life? Like, be brutally honest with yourself.
Yeah.
Do you tend to finish what you start? I find that types of people that tend to do very well in franchising are former athletes. And it doesn't mean like you were professional, but like, did you play sports in high school? Like, are you competitive?
You got a track record of diligence.
Yes. Right. Winning, discipline. Maybe you were in the military, a lot of former, whether you were on the enlisted side or the officer side, but you have structure. There's discipline in place. You can follow a system, right? There's structure there. But yeah, asking yourself, do I follow through on things? And asking yourself, like with risk tolerance, right? Are you the type of person that's super conservative with your investments and everything else? And not to say that there aren't certain franchise opportunities for those people, but the reality is if you can't make decisions quickly, you're gonna get left behind. I'm someone that I make decisions relatively quickly, not rashly. I mean, I do tend to lean that more that direction than not.
No, I think, keep going.
But you have to be able to make decisions.
Bingo.
Yes, plan, get a plan in place. But so many people get stuck in paralysis by analysis that they don't do anything. And I have so many clients like that where it's like, look, we've been spinning our wheels going through this process for so much time now. And gently and lovingly, I try to call them and say, look, it almost feels like maybe we shouldn't do this because it feels like
if you wanted to do it, you might have already done it.
And I'll have the fear conversation with them. And it's very normal. Like everyone has fear. I don't care who you are. If you've done this before, there's always a little bit of nervousness. But if you're debilitated by the fear, and if I can sense that you're already like really getting shaky and nervous after an intro meeting with the franchisor, like one call, maybe this isn't the right fit, right? And maybe business ownership isn't the right fit for you because franchising really is the best way to do it. And if you're worried about buying into a franchise, you probably shouldn't even do something on your own. And you have to ask yourself, do you have the fortitude? And so like, have you demonstrated that in other areas of your life? And if you have, maybe business ownership is the right fit. Maybe franchising is. But if you haven't, there's nothing wrong with
cross that bridge first.
Right. There's nothing wrong with kicking butt in the corporate world. And there's other ways that you can excel as an executive. There's other, businesses you can start on the side as kind of side hustles and things like that, maybe you won't get rich off of, but can generate some extra revenue, but are maybe more in line with your risk tolerance, maybe real estate investing, those kinds of things. But you have to look inward is, I think, the bottom line.
A little more tried and true. I like that. That shocked me. Because I was kind of thinking you were going to give me like some baselines of like, well, you need this and that. But I mean, I think that's the key for anybody in any business, is you've got to look inside and be brutally honest. And go, I don't think I got the stomach for this. I like what you said about making decisions too, because I do feel like that's one thing that sets, I see it a lot in construction where you have different crew leads and stuff like that. I think you have a lot of good decision makers, and specifically in my background, working for and around and serving contractors, a lot of guys, they end up there because they're good decision makers or they're not too scared to make a decision. And I feel like it tends to pan out better than if you just sit around and just really paralysis by analysis.
If you sit in the middle of the road, you're going to get hit.
That's a great analogy. Again, you came with the win. So let's say that somebody is, or no, you know what I think is a more fun question? Do you have an example of where one just blew up completely and it was like, yeah, no, we got to cut ties. This isn't going to be a win. And can you share? To some degree.
I do. There's probably limits as far as what we can share here, but and I won't name,
or maybe a lesson you learned from that experience opposed to.
Yeah, well, I guess I can give a lesson from it. So there was a franchise that the model worked completely.
Mm-hmm.
The model worked. The franchise owners were doing well, but it was more of an emerging brand. And one of my clients had been looking into that. We actually originally started off. I think our first conversation was in October of last year, and then he ended up not moving forward with this franchise, I think, until about May of 2024.
Okay.
We looked at a first round of options. He did due diligence. It didn't really fit his criteria and what he's looking for.
Okay.
No harm, no foul. Like I tell my clients all the time, I'd rather you not buy a franchise than buy one that's the wrong fit.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, maybe he should have done one of the ones on the first round, which, not so great. But so I'm like, okay, let's look at some new options. If we ever need to put a pause on the process, I tell my clients we can do that all the time. Because again, I want to make sure it's the right fit, provided that we're not just backing out because of fear, right? Is it fear or is it just not the right fit, right? And there's a fine line there.
I agree.
So anyway, we came back to the table, looked at some new options, this new brand and a couple of other options we're looking at too. Like he's like, this one really seems to fit my background, my interests, my level of community involvement, my skill sets, all of that just seemed to really check out. It checked all of his boxes. And the validation from the franchise owners that were already in the brand was very, very good.
Okay.
But
seems like a win.
Right. The unfortunate reality was the franchisor, so the founder of the franchise was, and again, I want to be careful of what I'm saying here because there's still things that are being hashed out. I don't know all the facts of the situation, but there were things that he was doing that I would consider probably borderline illegal or at least very, very highly unethical, not what he should have been doing. And best case scenario, the best way you could put it, and again, won't name the brand or anything like that, but mismanagement to the highest degree. And so the franchise ended up needing to go under and essentially declaring bankruptcy.
Dang it.
And so a lot of these people ended up in a situation where, they can't, like they're kind of out of the business. Now, a lot of the franchise owners internally kind of banded up and, said, look, the model works. Like we can still do this. So there are some things that are coming out from it. But a lesson that I learned is like when that happens, it's very easy. Most advisors and consultants in the industry that do what I do, they're hiding under a rock at that point.
I can totally feel that.
Yeah.
What happened?
I called my client and I said, look, here's what I'm hearing. And of course, he had already heard too. Like he's in the thick of it. Here are some options as far as like what we can do. You could either do nothing and call this a loss. You could either operate this thing solo and partner with, some of these other guys that are putting some systems together and at least try to recoup your initial investment or, some of the initial fees that were paid. So we just talked through options, but I called him and I had stayed on him and like it, it's a terrible feeling because that is literally a worst case scenario with the client, but
you can't be held responsible for everything either.
No,
I see your intent to do well,
but you lean in and, and obviously he's not happy with it, but he's like, no, like, look, we did the due diligence. It wasn't like you coached me on how to do this. Like we evaluated the opportunity. It was a yes. We had no control over, and there was really nothing that we could have done to know that at the top, they were really not doing things the right way.
Sounds like the black swan. You've heard of the black swan?
Yes. Yeah. And so it was unfortunate. There are sometimes things, and that's just risk inherent in business where you just sometimes don't know if there's something sketchy going on at the top. But what I learned from that is like lean in, and I'm not going to ever ditch my clients. And even through that, my client last week or the week before, he called me when I was on a meeting. And so he left me a voicemail and said, hey man, hope everything's great. Would like for you to talk to my wife. She's thinking about getting out of her, career as a teacher. Can you talk to us about some opportunities that might make sense for her? So even despite like that worst case scenario, he felt so good about the guidance that I gave him through the process, but also the fact that I didn't just say, hey, good luck, see you later. This is your problem. Goodbye. That, he is still referring me as his wife. That's right.
Killer.
So that felt good. But I guess, what I learned from that is you really have to, from a franchise buyer perspective, when one of the final stages in the franchise buying process is something called a confirmation or discovery day.
Okay.
That is where you would typically fly out to the headquarters of the franchise, meet the founder, meet the leadership team, meet the support staff. You'll get to talk to and mingle with other people that are thinking about buying into that franchise from around the country as well. And it's important that that's where you get some of the more intangible stuff.
Yeah.
Like get a feel for like, did this guy have an ego where he was investing into the wrong things or image, or was there anything off about him? And I think that many people kind of were like, yeah, I don't really like him. I like some of the other people on the team.
Yeah.
I think you have to go with your gut on some of those things too, even if the numbers seem to check out, the systems seem to check out. If there's something that says no, as far as like the culture fit or the personality type at corporate or some of those other things, you really got to be aware of that. And I think that's something that I always coach on. I always let my clients know those things too. And that's really why you're going to that discovery day, to really meet them and get a sense, making sure that your values are aligned with them, making sure your vision is aligned with them, and making sure that personalities don't clash and the people that you'll be working with on the support team you enjoy.
Yeah.
And really vetting that out. But then there's also that small percentage where sometimes there are certain things that you just can't anticipate or uncover. And that's just that unfortunate reality where those are some of the risks that are inherent in business. And I wouldn't let that deter people, but that's really where on the front end, like make sure that you're doing proper due diligence. But even if we do that, sometimes it's never going to be a sure fit.
Yeah. It's just
sure
nothing
thing.
is sure in life. You know, your breath tomorrow is about as sure as that deal. You know? And so I appreciate that. And this is the thing that's so tough is once you experience it, it hits different. Like you're not going to not tell anybody about the potential and the importance of going to visitor day post this occurrence. Whereas before, maybe you're like, yeah, no, get out there. I don't know. I'm just totally ad-libbing for the camera, really. But like, you know, on one hand, you might act a certain way and then you experience it and then you understand and you're like, okay, that's why this was so important. And and maybe you knew it. Maybe you knew it inside, but then it's just like, man, it hits so different.
Oh, it does. And some franchises will offer a virtual discovery day. I mean, discovery day is that's always mandated by the brand.
And I feel like you're almost crossing the finish line. Like, is it just like almost like the last, like, do some people slough it off because of that? Maybe are they already so invested that like, that's just like, well, I got to meet Bob. I mean, I'm in. You know?
Yeah. I mean, you should be at around a 90% before you go to that, because typically there is an expectation where they're going to say, hey, like there's really nothing else to learn at this point. So when you get back from confirmation day, you know, within 7 days or so, kind of, you know, give us a verbal yes or no. And then a week after that, usually you're signing your franchise agreement and paying franchise
fees. I
fees.
imagine most of those are yeses. Like there's a high percentage of if you get to that day, we're good.
Yeah, exactly. And it should be. And it's a mutual interview. So they're going to do a one-on-one with you there as well.
Okay.
Like, and really the whole process is a mutual interview. It's a mutual kind of feeling out. I have had clients that, and I coached them on this before they went to Discovery Day, but they were on their phone during some of the presentations.
Wow.
Or they left early for a flight, like 45 minutes early from the presentation, and their flight's like 4 or 5, like they have the itinerary for everyone that's at Discovery Day, so they know when people's flights are, and they left way too early, or they got too drunk. There was somebody that, not one of my clients, but he was in the bathroom and he was talking to some other potential franchise owner and talking crap about one of the founders, and the founder had walked into the bathroom, heard it, no go.
Yeah.
So people get denied all the time, especially for the brands we work with. Like these are legitimate opportunities that have a lot of inquiries. So
like we're not taking posers.
No.
You know, like better be ready to go.
Right. They get paid. To the extent that you drive revenue, they get a percentage of that. So the more revenue you produce, the more money they get paid. And so they want to have people in that are going to be strong operators.
It's a good example of a win-win.
Right. They have a vested interest, right? So it is a mutual interview, but again, not every franchise is created equal. And many franchises are just looking to get bodies in. And so you have to understand, is this a franchise that really seems to be vetting, and do they really care about, are they being very intentional about the kinds of people that they're bringing into this opportunity, or is it just kind of willy-nilly? And that's another reason why I think it's not just important to go to Discovery Day, but most franchises require you to go to that.
Makes sense.
But also so that when you're there, like I can evaluate like what other kinds of people did they invite here? Are these sharp people? Are these people that seem to have business acumen? Are these people like what are their backgrounds? Like evaluating that kind of thing.
And it ultimately, like you're being careful too, because this reflects all back on you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, at the end of the day, if you send 4 winos to something and they totally trashed a place when it was really just supposed to be like, hey, we're going to cross the finish line. Like, no more franchises are coming to you from them. And I imagine it's kind of a smaller group of people,
it is
that are doing this.
Yeah. I mean, Discovery Day, you mean?
Not Discovery Day. I guess I mean the franchising world, I feel like would be pretty small. Like it seems niche to me.
It is in many ways.
I mean, I get it takes an army, but I just feel like it's like, I haven't met somebody that has your role before in my life, honestly.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that community's got to be a little bit tight for.
It is. Within franchising, you can build a really great reputation pretty quickly and you can ruin it pretty quickly because the reality is, franchising as a part of the economy is pretty massive. I think we're at like 3% of the GDP. There's over 800,000 franchise locations around the country.
We employ, I see them everywhere.
Employing millions of Americans, creating tons of jobs, tons of economic output. But in the world of helping people to franchise, like there's only about 15,000 franchise locations, units that are bought every year.
Is that it?
Only about 15,000. And that number has been relatively stagnant, for the past 20 or so years.
It's just the number.
It's just kind of the number. Now, I think that there's potential for that number to uptick. I think that, so franchising has historically kind of trailed behind every other industry in the sense that as other industries tend to innovate and, grow. Not to say that the industries within franchising don't innovate, but oftentimes the franchise industry itself, like the act of franchising, telling the story of franchising, selling franchises, that side of things has tended to be a little bit of a dinosaur and has trailed behind a little bit more behind other industries. And so I think that we are kind of one of the best kept secrets. In my mind, franchising is the most democratic wealth creation vehicle in America. It's just not talked about enough. Most people don't know that franchising is a viable option. And those that think about franchising, they have a lot of misconceptions.
I'll be honest, it's a little overwhelming. So I want you to unpack that for me and be like, okay, what would it take? I mean, this whole journey of opening my own business has been just mind-boggling and eye-opening. And I've been on the phone with my business owner friends like so much.
Yeah.
But franchising, like all the systems and stuff that I'm building right now, those are all done. You just get somebody like me or you to just show up and just do the things. Sort of, It's probably an oversimplification. But how does it get any better than that?
Yeah. And, the reality is yes, but I think a lot of people also think that the franchise is just going to do the work for them. Like they're going to buy in and just because I signed the franchise agreement, I pay them the franchise fee, the business will build itself. No, you still got to execute. You still got to build the dang thing like you would with any other business. They just have the systems and support in place for you. But also, again, like I've said, not every franchise is created equal. They're all going to say that they have the best training systems and support.
For sure.
The way that we get that information and validate the viability and the reality of that is you get to talk to existing franchise owners. And I give my clients a list of questions. At Sidekick, we give them a list of questions to ask about based on different subjects around the support, around the training, staffing, the financials, return on investment potential, royalty, how did they fund the business, all these different things, so that they can see the overall viability, not just as a brand, but also for them specifically. Yeah. Because not every franchise is created equal, but some of the great ones do have amazing systems. They have call centers that will schedule appointments for you. They will do your bookkeeping.
Like I feel like that's a win. Like if you find one like that, like it's a little bit more, I don't want to say turnkey, but just imagine a call center. And then, okay, well here, go. We've got a location in, Tucson for this example now. Go there, Wow.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that's not really talked about enough in franchising is the network of the franchisees. A colleague of mine, for example, first and foremost, you have a network of people you can lean on, share best practices with. Hey, what's working for you?
It's a community.
What's not? There's a community.
True community. I believe it because I think it would be tough. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I can talk to people around the country. I can talk to the top performers. Like, what are you doing that's so different? And blah, blah, blah. But you have that ability to lean on people. But then I think about a colleague of mine, I would say he's more of an acquaintance, but he and I are friendly. And he and his family, they started off, I think they started from scratch. Midas, the auto repair franchise?
For sure.
So they started 3 or 5 of them themselves. Like they built them out.
Mm-hmm.
And today, my colleague, he and his team, they have, I think, 35 to 40 Midas locations.
Wow.
In different parts around the country.
Okay.
But they didn't start all those from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
They bought out retiring owners. So
that's a neat model right there.
So franchising provides not just a built-in exit strategy. So if I'm an owner, I have a network of other owners I could potentially sell to. Most franchise resales, the good ones anyways, are going to other owners in the system.
Get it already.
It's a cleaner transaction.
Yeah.
They get it. They're going to be approved by the franchisor.
Yeah.
So it's a simple transaction.
Mm-hmm.
So you can, and my friend, he leveraged seller financing as well. So there's tons of different deal structures you can do.
I love that.
And so their business, their Midas little empire, they do, I think, north of 40 million a year in annual revenue right now.
Fantastic.
And so it's a way to have a potential exit.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to build enterprise value. And then once you start playing in, 10 million a year in revenue, private equity dollars are, really attracted to the franchise industry, especially on the franchisor side, but even the franchisee side. I know HVAC guys and, even electricity type franchises that have had some pretty big exits or a lot of PE attention. So there's a lot of really cool things you can do from, building enterprise value. A lot of people, they think about, how can I replace the income I'm getting from my job? Cool. That's good. Check one. Let's focus on that. But let's also think about the enterprise value you can build and what can I sell this for someday? What is my exit value? I'm building an asset here. Whereas with my job, it is my income is a 2-week shelf life.
Yeah.
Right.
You're trading time for money.
Yeah.
Instead of money for time.
Yeah. And the reality is, like, franchising is not just food, because I'm clearly talking about HVAC companies and this kind of thing, right?
Service, I think, is key.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the weirdest franchise that you can think of? The weirdest, wow, how did they franchise this? But they pulled it off, like zoos or something. Like, is there like a really weird, hey, we go out and we do this? I bet it's service, I guess. But is there just one that's like, dude, this is crazy? There's
so many, almost so many that some of them I'm blanking on.
Auto detailing. Is there an auto detailing franchise?
None that we have in our portfolio right now, but they certainly exist. I don't think that's a weird brand by any means.
Seems like that would be a win.
Yeah, no, I think it's good. I think those mobile type opportunities are great. And I typically like fragmented industries.
What does that mean?
It means there's no real national player. For example,
mobile auto detailing. You don't just think of somebody, right?
Right. Like if I ask you, who's the top food franchise, you're going to say McDonald's, Subway, maybe.
Yep.
If I ask you, who's the top insulation company in the nation? Most people are not going to be able to answer.
Yeah, no, JB Insulation.
Maybe, but you live in that world. Most people are not going to be able to do that.
Fair.
And the reality is, you don't brand. A lot of people think brand name is so important. And look, brand name is important, and being a part of a franchise that has good branding and is building a brand is important. But it's a chicken or the egg type thing. Why did McDonald's become successful?
Yeah.
Was it just the Golden Arches? No, they were selling franchises before the Golden Arches were very popular. The Golden Arches got famous because they had a system that delivered a better customer experience. They were able to churn out hamburgers.
Just systems made McDonald's.
And 100%.
Forward. Yeah.
Exactly. But that's what people don't understand is it was the systems that built McDonald's. It wasn't the brand that the systems built the brand, not the brand built the systems. Yeah. And so what you're buying into with a franchise, the brand to some extent, but some industries, brand is not as important. Like a lot of the home services type businesses. Are there systems in place that allow you to execute at a far superior level than the competition that you can steal market share? And are you in an industry that's growing, right? Like my buddy Dan and his franchise, Voda Cleaning and Restoration, I'll give him a plug.
Good.
They are one of the largest. They've awarded almost 200 territories since 2023.
Wow.
It takes the average
2023?
Yeah.
It's only 2024.
Correct.
Okay.
And only 5% of franchises ever hit the 100 territory mark.
Wow.
And the average length of time it takes them to do that is 10 years.
Wow.
So it's a very popular brand. It's because first of all, he invested millions into it. And his team and their company, but it's also because it's a brand that is and it's restoration. It's like Serve Pro and all that other kind of thing. But even as big as the Serve Pros are, Serve Pro is
They don't have a good name.
Sure. And they have like 10% of the market share, if that. So it's still a fragmented industry. Most of the players, there's some franchises, Servpro, Paul Davis, some others. But even with all of them in the space, they don't have most of the market share. Like
There's always a little bit of room.
Well, pizza is a $50 billion a year industry. And there's pizza shops everywhere that, for the most part, seem to survive. And the answer is, well, it's a big industry. There's enough room. There's enough pizza being bought. There's enough demand out there. And in the water damage space, there's 14,000 instances of it that occur every day in the U.S. And most of them are mom and pop shops. And it's a $210 billion industry. So there's enough room for the players, and it's a growing industry as well. So there's enough room for guys like my buddy Dan to come in. So he's not really, yes, he's competing with Servpro and everyone else, but he's really competing a lot with the unsophisticated mom and pops that don't have the systems in place. You know, oftentimes, I think more and more it's becoming more sophisticated, but they're bringing a white collar sophistication to an otherwise blue collar industry, and they have the processes in place. Their call center is answering the phone on the second ring, right? Whereas if it's restoration.
I just did it. I had to call somebody, and it's like I went to voicemail. And then I sent an email, and then I went to voicemail again.
If you have to chase someone down, like oftentimes it's a Chuck in a truck who's doing everything. He's the marketing guy. He's wearing all the different hats.
So hard.
Like I was as my own independent advisor, which is why having the systems in place, having a team where you just got to do your thing, own your role. That's how you can really build a business and wow the customer with better customer experience, better. It's basic things like communication. There's so many. Everyone wants to know the secret. The secret is like the little stuff that like to do, but you don't do. Either because you're not willing to do it or because you don't have the systems in place to do it. Things like answering the phone, calling people back.
It's time. Like
being
point,
consistent with it.
You've got to be willing to give up and give to the system. Let the system do the system stuff because you can't do it all. Like, even though you think you're the best at everything,
right?
I think you've been there, you found your spot where you're like, yes, this is what I am going to be a rock star at.
Exactly. And then it comes down to, you got to be able to delegate. And the cool thing about the good franchises is they're going to say, okay, you reached X amount of revenue. It's time to get a new truck. It's time to hire another technician. It's time to hire another sales guy. So they can teach you how to scale.
That thought out. That's kind of cool.
The good ones are. Oh, heck yeah.
That's really cool.
Yep.
I hadn't even considered that. I like the investment potential that you've really opened my eyes to in terms of, I don't know, it just seems so scary before, but I feel like it would be a great place for capital to live, honestly, as opposed to the stock market or real estate and things that do well, by all means. But is there kind of a standard like, hey, these lines of investment are going to net you, the stock market, average of whatever it is now, 9% a year, or a CD is going to get you 3% a year. Like, is there a number associated with the franchise space? Don't answer that. Is there an ETF that's like franchises?
Interesting. So yes, and I'll get into that. So
I don't know. Like, no advice here, by the way. We're just talking.
Yes, no advice. I'm not telling anyone to invest in. Talk to your financial advisor, talk to your tax advisor, et cetera. But there's a buddy of mine, Kenny Rose, who's the CEO and founder of a group called FranShares. And this isn't an endorsement or anything like that. But and right now, it's only for accredited investors, but eventually they're going to roll it out to the masses. But it is essentially ETFs where they, almost like venture capital, actually, where they will raise money from investors. Right now, you will have to be an accredited investor to contribute to it. They will go out there and buy franchises. They will put in the operators to operate those franchises, and they'll have different funds for that. So I think one of their first deals was like a trash and food business, so trash and teriyaki. So it's like a trash compacting business and then a teriyaki business. They bought several territories to that, put the operators in, and then they'll have the profits of that kicked out to the investors and whatnot. So that does exist. They're going to create more and more funds for that. Eventually, their goal is to kind of democratize and allow more people to, invest into funds like that.
More accessible.
Yeah, and I don't know, ultimately what the returns end up shaking out to be for that. Yeah. But as an asset class, I don't think there's anything better than business ownership. I'm a huge believer in the stock market. Back in the day, I had my Series 6, 63, 65. I was a registered investment advisor, so I spoke that world all the time, and I'm a huge believer in it. But the S&P 500 is average, 9-10% over just about any 20-year period. And that's great, but you're not getting rich off of, short term based on that. But can you create, and I don't want to, franchising is not
we got to be so careful, but I'm with you.
but it's not a get rich quick overnight thing either. But the reality is, some of the year over year growth that I see some of these franchise owners having is just unbelievable.
That's the bingo. Even if you've got a year of 5 and then a year of 7 and then a 12 and then a 15 and a 20, like you just can't do that in the stock market.
Yeah. And when I think about what, Robert Kiyosaki says, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, great book. And, an asset is something that puts money into your pocket. As a liability is anything that takes money out of your pocket. So that's why he even considered home a liability to some extent. Now, of course, you're building equity, but it's taking money.
Everybody's on that page right now.
Right.
Interesting to see the flip.
Yes. But because it takes money out of your pocket, and even buying rental properties in real estate, it's like, look, what am I going to, especially right now, like, am I going to get like $300, $400, $500 off of that? And then if there's a maintenance issue that just completely wipes out my profit for the year, and I have to invest, a good chunk of change to get that property, depending on where in the country I buy it. Whereas, most franchises are under a $350,000 total investment. 50% of franchises, total all-in investment, franchise fee, 3 months of working capital, everything else involved, vehicles, equipment, insurance, whatever. Under $350,000 all in.
That's a nugget. I did not know that.
Yeah. Most people think it's millions of dollars. It's not. It's not like a McDonald's, right? Yeah. Where that's a huge investment. It's mostly, $150,000, $200,000 all in to get into a franchise, maybe $250,000. And just like a home, you're not buying all that in cash. Most people are going to finance. You're going to take out a mortgage for a home. You're going to finance your business. So if you did an SBA loan, and we have resources for that, companies we can connect you with that specialize in that at Franchise Sidekick. But typically it's going to be 20% down payment, maybe 30% depending on various factors.
Wow.
So you're not forking up all this cash to be able to do that. So it's a lot easier and more accessible than people think it is. And it's also not as big of an investment as they think either. Like most homes these days, especially where we live here, are going to be over $350,000.
But no home's going to pay you what a $350,000 investment.
That's my point.
Yeah.
If you can put your money now, is real estate going to be a little bit more passive? Yeah. Sure. Right.
Well, way.
Right.
Yeah.
But a business in terms of like pure economic benefit, it doesn't even compare.
Yeah.
Like pound for pound, the potential for it doesn't compare. And if you do it the right way, and I never talk, nothing is absentee, right? You're not ever going to be an absentee owner. Now, well, you can get to a point where you're relatively semi-absent. I know owners that own several different franchises in different states. They have a management team in place that does most of the things for them.
Yeah, but you pay for that.
And you built it over time, but you also pay for it. But even in the beginning, is there a way to start with a manager in place and successfully keep your job? Yes. And, there's a wrong way to do it too, right? I think this idea that I'm just going to hire someone I've never met, pay them $60,000 a year and expect them to build my business for me, like that's not going to happen. But something that my friend, mentor, and founder of Franchise Sidekick came up with, Ryan Zink. And Ryan is a powerhouse in franchising. He's a multi-unit franchisee with Orange Theory Fitness, with a company called Soccer Stars. He owned Anytime Fitnesses back in the day. He was a founder of the franchisor Complete Nutrition, which was a massive like GNC type franchise. Exited from that, sold that to private equity. Sold his franchise sales organization to private equity, and then created Franchise Sidekick. So very, very wealthy guy, very, very, but more importantly, really, really smart business dude and franchise guy. And he came up with an acronym, and this is how he runs all of his franchise locations, was through an acronym called—
Probably one of those two.
STIC, right.
Okay.
STIC, S-T-I-C, which stands for, if I'm going to have someone that's going to run my franchise for me, I want, S is skills. So they have to have the skills necessary to drive that business. So if it requires me to go out there and prospect, well, yeah, they got to have business development and sales type skills. Can they lead, manage, build a team, build a good culture? They have a good attitude. T is trust. Like ideally it's someone that I have a relationship with, and it doesn't need to be like they're your best friend or anything like that. But someone that ideally you trust, maybe you know them from your church or your community, or maybe it's someone that you meet through someone you trust.
Yeah.
So you get a recommendation or referral. So ideally it's someone that you know, or through your kind of network, you've met that person.
Yeah.
I is they're properly incentivized. So, don't step over dollars to get to dimes. Don't be a penny wise, but a pound foolish. Hire someone, maybe pay them a little bit above market rate in terms of salary, and then tie some kind of incentive to the business, whether that's profit sharing. So allow them to participate in the upside of the business, or maybe give them vested equity or phantom equity, which is where, if they stay with you for a certain period of time, like let's say you stick with me for 5 years, for every year you're with me, I'll give you 1 to 3% equity up until 10 to 15%, let's say. If you leave before that, you don't get anything, right? So you have to stick with me for 5 years to get that.
Phantom equity? Is that what you
That's
just
kind of what that is.
described?
It's the same thing.
Like there's a stop loss. Like you need to finish it out before you get any equity.
Right. It's equity that doesn't exist. It's phantom because it's kind of a ghost until you stick with me for those certain years and then you're vested. And from like a tax liability standpoint, it's a better way to structure it for your manager too. Again, talk to your tax advisor, blah, blah, blah. But that's a way where you can structure things so that they're like, okay, I have golden handcuffs. I don't want to leave because this can be my business and I'm building something for not just for this guy, but for myself. And then the C in the acronym is capacity, meaning do they have the capacity where this is their full-time thing? Yeah. They're not building their real estate business on the side. They're not doing this. Like this is their full-time gig. So STIC, skills, trust, incentives, capacity. If you have that, you can put a manager in place who can run a lot of the day-to-day for you. You can keep your current job, assuming your job is flexibility. Ideally, if you're remote work from home, that is the best situation. Yeah. But that's the way that you could possibly do it. So that's the way to responsibly do it, I would say.
Dude, my mind is blown right now. There was a lot of...
I know. I talk fast too.
But it was a lot and I loved it. And I think you've shifted, even just how I'm looking at my own business and really said some things that align with my business, as well as like, okay, like maybe kind of validating like, all right, this is a good method for not necessarily franchising, who knows what's in the future for me, but for sure, just kind of, I want to treat my people right. I want them to stick around, and some of these were good little tidbits. Okay, so land the plane for me. Tell me what you're doing in 10 years.
In 10 years, well, in 10 years, I'm still going to be building. I'll be in the franchise industry. That's for sure. Okay. I will never be the person that retires. If anything, I might be like semi-retired someday. Yeah. But where I have things in my mind is I would love to always be an advisor here at Sidekick. I love helping people buy franchises. But in 10 years, more than likely, I will have partnered with somebody who wanted to franchise their business, be a partner in it where I have equity, they have equity. I use my relationships, my skills, my knowledge of how to find good franchisees, qualify them, get them to buy, to help them to get franchisees in and then grow it. Win. Help the franchisees kill it, help them make a lot of money, make sure they're successful, invest a ton into making sure that we have all the infrastructure and stuff in place. And then, once it's kind of built, I think eventually, some people have a skill set where they're the kind of guy who can take the business from 0 to X amount in revenue, but then from there, it's better to hand it off to somebody else that knows how to take it from, 10 or 100.
Weird.
It's true though. Some people
if you switch the roles, this guy would fumble.
Correct.
It's crazy.
Exactly. So for me, in my mind, it'd be, I think eventually it will get to a point where me and maybe the other founder, where we'll get to a point and say, hey, look, I think it's time for us to take our chips off the table and then do something else, maybe rinse and repeat in a different type of franchise, but, sell to private equity or something like that. And then move on to another franchise or what have you.
Do you think it's mindset that takes, where this guy can't do this and this, when you're talking about getting from 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 30?
Yes, I think everything is mindset. I think it definitely is that, but I also think it's also skills too.
For sure. Yeah. Like to some degree. Yeah. But I think you could go to school, pass all the tests, have all the skills, but not be able to believe that that's a reality, potential reality.
Yeah. And there's certain grit, and then it's preference too. Some people like chocolate, some like vanilla. Some people prefer to work in this kind of side of things. And because once you get to a certain size too, then it's like you can drive results through financial engineering, by, through taking on different kinds of debt service or fundraising, there's different things you can do. And these are levers that private equity will pull to really grow the value in a franchise or a business in general. But yeah, that's kind of where I see things. And there's a lot of really good private equity companies in franchising. I know a lot of people, when they think private equity, they think evil, bad. And there's some that are out there that are not so good, but a lot of, there's horror stories in franchising with private equity, but there's also a lot of really amazing success stories too. So if you find the right partner, that would be our goal at the end of the day. But if you ask me where I see things in 10 years, It's either in the thick of things, building like a big national franchisor, exiting from it at that point and going to the next thing, like never stopping.
Yeah.
But I want to always be in the realm of like coaching entrepreneurs, being a part of helping more and more people realize their dream of entrepreneurship. I'll likely still be in Scottsdale. If I'm in like Paradise Valley, Arcadia, that would be pretty cool.
Yes,
but of course,
out here.
right, big dreams, but wife, kids, all that good stuff.
How fun.
Yeah. But we're not there yet. A lot of work to do.
Christian, this was fantastic. I'm going to be up all night thinking about everything that you said. I just want to say thanks for coming through.
This was a blast. Anytime, man. I appreciate you inviting me on the show.
We will do this again.
Sounds good. I'm happy to.
All right, we'll see you.